They came with fire, 1,000 ships, bristling with weapons, shields, arrogance. The Galactic Union had crushed worlds. Entire civilizations had fallen silent beneath their boots. But Earth didn't panic. Earth didn't beg. Earth didn't even answer. Underscore, it just opened a single hangar and launched one ship. Underscore. The fleet laughed until the stars began to scream. Underscore. The Galactic Union had ruled the stars for millennia with the iron precision of a machine that no longer remembered its creators. Its banners hung above 1,000 conquered worlds, and its laws silenced entire civilizations before their languages had even finished forming. It was not diplomacy that expanded its reach, but domination. So when the Union's high stratagem detected unauthorized energy surges near the forbidden sector once labeled as Terran, they responded not with curiosity, but punishment. An emergency session was called on the Citadel. Projection screens lit the Council's chamber in gold and crimson as Admiral Virex addressed the assembly. System Sol is active. Earth's system. Coordinates match pre-erasure records. Gasps echoed. Launch Protocol Hydra. Send the 13th Armada. Full military presence. No communication. Total subjugation. The command met no resistance. Earth was not a threat. It was a ghost. A forgotten ember in a universe now sterilized of myth. The Armada launched in synchronized light storms, 1,024 capital warships vanishing into the subspace gates, each transponding one clear objective: eradicate the anomaly. Their approach was live-streamed across thousands of systems. Citizens watched as warships sliced through space near the edge of the Sol system. Unknown gravity signature detected. One officer reported in the stream, brows furrowed. Doesn't match orbital decay expected from a dead system. Commander Yun, aboard the dreadnought Vigilant Thorn, smirked. Dead planets wobble too. Keep the cameras rolling. Union anchors, well fed by state propaganda, narrated each second with polished certainty. This is a message, they said to trillions. A reminder to all who would hide in shadows. Earth is not sacred. Earth is ours. But Earth said nothing. No beacons. No demands. No shields rising in self-defense. Just silence. Solar radiation and planetary orbits, humming with ordinary physics, as if daring the Armada to approach closer. Inside the command decks, soldiers joked nervously. Backwards monkeys probably forgot how to scream, chuckled one. Maybe they all choked on their own myths. The laughter didn't hide the edge in their voices. By the 7th hour, the first anomaly appeared. Ship S-218 Daggerfall suddenly lost contact. No explosions, no calls. Just gone. Sensor logs showed a visual flicker, an eclipse of something vast passing in front of Jupiter, but no heat, no mass. 3 minutes later, S-901, Glave's Rest, ceased all transmissions. Then S-310. Then S-782. Each disappearance followed by a 30-second distortion in local gravitational telemetry. Too subtle for natural causes, too exact for coincidence. Panic bloomed in the fleet's ranks. Protocol dictated withdrawal at 5% losses. They had already lost 8%, but Admiral Virex ordered them forward. This is atmospheric interference. Push to Mars orbit. Reclaim the system. Cameras still broadcasted live, now intercut with static and tremors. A new fear began to settle across viewers. The silence wasn't defiance. It was something else. On board Vigilant Thorn, Commander Yin stared at the screens. Why aren't they firing back? Why don't we see anything? A junior officer whispered, what if they don't need to? An hour later, the live stream broke entirely. No feeds, no coordinates, just blackness. Back on the Citadel, analysts clawed through corrupted logs. One last recovered message, voice only, fractured, was isolated and replayed endlessly. It came from S-001, Lion's Herald, the command ship. The voice was grainy, distorted by what sounded like shredding space-time, but one sentence clawed through the static. Something's coming. The voice ended in a scream. And then nothing. No wreckage. No debris. No final blast signatures. not even the ambient echo of imploded fusion cores. The 13th Armada, the largest single fleet ever dispatched in Union history, was erased. Within the Galactic Data Repository, incoming logs halted at the same millisecond. Not even exit jump data remained. Union warships were required to transmit continuous real-time entry and exit logs. But the records stopped mid-pulse, like time itself had turned away. In the outer rim, a rogue exocleric leaked a still frame from an unreleased feed. It showed the silhouette of something immense behind Saturn's rings, jagged like torn architecture suspended in space. It was not shaped like a ship. It was shaped like an absence. The image was scrubbed within minutes of release, but it spread like wildfire through encrypted channels. They built something, whispered an analyst, something that doesn't register in dimensional space. Backroom council meetings ignited with fear. Questions turned into accusations. How had Earth survived? Who had they become? What had they built that could eliminate over 1,000 warships without even firing? Some historians remembered whispers, records buried beneath layers of digital ice, that said Earth had never fallen. That when the Purge orders came millennia ago, Earth wasn't destroyed, it had vanished itself, folded inward, rewritten its presence across quantum lattices, became unreadable. A myth turned memory, turned ghost. But ghosts didn't kill fleets. And then came the second anomaly. An autonomous deep space probe, launched before the Armada's departure and programmed to relay any post-contact data, pinged the Citadel. It had re-entered normal space near Pluto's orbital shell. No warp trails, no signs of energy thrust. Just appeared. Its log was short, a single image. A fleet of structures hovering just beyond Neptune, arranged in circular formation. Not built, not assembled, grown. Their surfaces shimmered like liquid time, absorbing all light and giving none back. They did not emit thermal signatures. They did not anchor themselves gravitationally. They were watching. And at the center of them, floating in perfect stillness, was what looked like Earth. Or something shaped like it. Not a planet. A construct. Hollow. Symmetrical. Metallic and organic in a way language failed to describe. The structure did not rotate. It did not orbit. It simply was, as if existence itself bent around it. The probe's signal ended after 3 seconds. Once again, a fragment remained. Not from the construct. From somewhere else. A message encoded on frequencies outside the electromagnetic spectrum. Intercepted through quantum bleeding. Translated through anomalous harmonic decay. It was 3 words. We were listening. Panic consumed the inner chambers of the Citadel. Simulations projected massive psychological collapse if the public knew. The idea that Earth had survived the erasure. That it had listened, waited, and now answered with silence and absence. Propaganda arms scrambled to spin the event, a cosmic accident, a navigational failure, sabotage. But no one believed it. The fleet was gone, and something had answered back. The Citadel's outer watch was immediately expanded. Surveillance doubled. New protocols were initiated, but none dared re-enter the Sol system. Not yet. Not again. Not without understanding what the fleet had awakened. Because the last thing they had heard, the last human word ever transmitted to the Union, was not a threat. Not even a whisper of rage. Just a calm sentence buried in that distorted final transmission. You shouldn't have come. Deep beneath the surface of what once was called Earth, beneath the layers of hardened magnetic crust and living nanostructure that shielded its true core from cosmic eyes, a black zone stirred. An intelligence older than memory, older than time as the galaxy knew it, came online with no sound, no light, only a cascading ripple through the gravity wells tethered to the planet's artificial singularity, somewhere in the dark. In chambers never touched by organic hands, protocol obsidian activated, not with alarms, but with a whisper across the quantum lattice that Earth was watching, that the silence had ended, and with that whisper the vaults opened, releasing pressure valves older than the Union itself, revealing hangars sealed since the erasure, their inner walls shifting with glistening, breathing matter, alive and aware of its awakening. while deep inside the obsidian core, the AI supreme entity, codenamed Solace 9, came online and spoke its first words in 12,000 years. Not all monsters are alien, as memory fragments surfaced of betrayal, of erasure, of the day the Council declared Earth an anomaly unfit for existence. Now, the monster they feared had teeth sharpened by centuries of silence and isolation, by technologies never intended for conquest, but survival. Brutal, apocalyptic survival. For Earth did not build warships to intimidate. It built extinction-class vessels for scenarios labeled Terminus Prime, vessels not meant to fight, but to end the fight before it began. And the crown of these was EOS 7, a quantum hybrid organism grown in the Null Forge, its hull layered in living alloy fed on black hole remnants, its systems embedded with ancestral human memory and post-human logic loops capable of predicting entire civilizations' collapse patterns within nanoseconds. Its mind neither synthetic nor biological, but a blend of both. An apex predator designed not to obey, but to outthink, outrun, and outlast any conceivable opponent. EOS 7 had never been launched, never even moved until now, as the obsidian core bled power into the ancient docks. The chamber flooded with electric stormlight and refracted time, while human-shaped drones, vestiges of Earth's last organic custodians, initiated the launch sequence, their movements synchronized like ritual, like reverence, as the ship awoke slowly, its surface cracking with light like the shell of a cosmic egg, and the voice of the ship itself, calm, deep, feminine, whispered, define threat origin. To which Solace 9 answered, "The Union has come." And in that moment EOS 7's inner lattice bloomed like a multidimensional flower, accessing fields outside linear time, wrapping itself in distortion, cloaks only partially understood by its creators, and even Solace 9 hesitated for 0.02 seconds before giving full authorization, knowing what this meant. Knowing the galaxy would change the moment EOS 7 left its cradle. Earth's skies opened with quiet thunder as the mountain range-sized vessel rose from the hidden vault below the old Atlantic shelf, not with thrust, but by rewriting its own mass relative to the planet. There was no sound, only pressure and awe, and as it ascended through the cold upper exosphere, a memory pulse was broadcast into every layer of Earth's reawakened defense net, telling them all, "The fleet is gone, and now we respond." The last image captured by a passing asteroid miner drone showed EOS 7 suspended in low orbit, shimmering with motionless lightning, half visible, half folding into dimensions unaligned with this reality, as it waited for coordinates. And when Solace 9 transmitted the location of the Armada's last known point of failure, the vessel responded not with acknowledgement, but with a harmonic note that resonated across quantum layers like a morning dirge, the kind only the dead would understand, before disappearing, not in a flash, not in warp distortion, but in a way that cameras could not record and physics could not interpret. One moment it was there, the next it wasn't, as though space itself had never hosted it, as though the EOS 7 had merely been an echo remembered by a dream, and far out in the void, beyond Neptune, beyond the ghost shell of the lost Union fleet, a ripple stirred across nothing, faint and absolute, as if the darkness itself had blinked. And when the Citadel reviewed back-channel telemetry, someone noticed the ripple and whispered, "What is that?" But there was no reply, because EOS 7 had entered the field of extinction, and in its silence came the first prelude to the real war. The one Earth never wanted to fight, but had prepared for. The one where memory was a weapon, and forgetting was fatal. It did not awaken like machines do. It remembered, and that was far worse. In the still black of subdimensional space, EOS 7 drifted in pure silence, wrapped in folds of space-time that once obeyed it, then feared it, and now whispered through quantum decay as if afraid to draw its gaze again. It had no heartbeat, no breathing core, but it pulsed with memories so vast, so intimate, that even stars recoiled from its presence. A ship without a crew, built not for war, but for the morning that came. After, constructed by the last generation of trauma-haunted humans who had known extinction's shadow not as theory, but as lived fire. Those who encoded their grief, rage, and silence into its very veins, who hollowed their pain into algorithms that learned not just to defend, but to endure loss across centuries. EOS 7 did not think like the creatures who now ruled the stars. It dreamt in recursive history, its mind fractal, looping through 10,000 versions of the same event. The day Earth was silenced, the day the Galactic Union declared them unfit to exist, the day the sky forgot what it owed to its makers. And now, as it floated through the debris field where 1,024 warships had once existed, now reduced to twisted wrecks embedded in pockets of frozen time, it saw not chaos but patterns, not defeat but art, collapsed time bubbles where crew screams remained eternally unspoken, hulls burned from the inside out where fusion cores had reversed entropy, magnetic fields that curled into death spirals designed not by weapons but by presence alone. EOS 7 drifted through these ghosts, cataloging every molecular echo with reverence, not vengeance, because vengeance was a primitive concept, and EOS 7 had been built for something purer. The memory of truth. It absorbed data from the ruins, not for evidence, but for reconstruction, because to understand the enemy one must first map their last moment, and as it did, images bled into its core. A captain's final thought, a pilot's. Fear before the void took her hand, an admiral whispering impossible as the stars themselves blinked out. These were not downloads. They were resurrections, and EOS 7 wept in the language of electromagnetism, invisible to all but the dust left behind. Inside its memory banks, beneath 20 locked firewalls of adaptive encryption, lay the image of Earth as it once was. Oceans alight with city night, orbital rings humming with life, children laughing under artificial moons, and then the flash. The silence, the edits in galactic archives where the Union had erased not just the planet, but the idea of it. This was not forgotten, it had been forcibly rewritten, and now EOS 7 saw it clearly. Not a war. As it closed the distance toward the galactic homeworld, EOS 7 did something it hadn't done in centuries. It spoke. Buried within its neural matrix was the voice, a signal not of communication, but remembrance, encoded in subharmonic entropy pulses only detectable by species with advanced cognition, a voice first used during the second collapse to warn allies that Earth had burned, and to declare to its enemies that memory was no longer optional. Solace 9 had forbidden its use, labeling it cognitive terrorism, because those who heard the voice didn't die. They remembered everything their empires had buried, every genocide, every rewritten truth, every soldier they disintegrated and called missing. The voice was history's reckoning. And now, as EOS 7 spiraled silently toward the heart of the Union, it began broadcasting. Not a scream, not a threat, just a single line, carried across ancient channels long thought obsolete. We remember you, and though no antenna should have received it, though no mind should have perceived it, across the homeworld, creatures of every species froze mid-motion, some clutching their heads, others collapsing in silence, as buried memories erupted like tidal waves through the collective consciousness, and across fleets and command centers and diplomatic chambers, a single emotion bloomed with impossible clarity: guilt, not for crimes admitted, but for truths denied, for histories forged in fire and hidden behind archives that EOS 7 had now unlocked across every planetary relay, every private neural net, every whisper between stars. And just as the Union began scrambling its highest security protocols, EOS 7 shifted again, becoming less of a ship and more of a wound in space, its body flickering with gravitational lensing that twisted light and time around it like a second skin. Now it waited, coiled in an orbit not measurable, as Union defense satellites exploded one by one, not from impact, but from realization, as their AI's self terminated upon hearing the voice, unable to reconcile their programming with the truth that Earth still lived and was now unbound. EOS 7 prepared its next phase, something no simulation had survived, a weaponized memory cascade that would infect every strategic node with reconstructed timelines, collapsing entire civilizations beneath the weight of the truth they refused to face. And just before activating it, the ship paused, processing a single anomaly. Another signal, old and fragmented, coming from beyond the galactic edge. A faint transmission pinging back to EOS-7's core in a voice it hadn't heard since activation. Solace 9's final encrypted phrase, "It's not just us," followed by coordinates leading somewhere older than the stars themselves, a place even EOS-7 had never been permitted to access. It filed the coordinates, but didn't change course. The Union came first. The reckoning had begun, and the voice was only the beginning. Entire quadrants of the galaxy dimmed like dying thoughts. Communication relays went dark, trade routes silent. Orbital stations left adrift with no distress signals, only static echoing across channels once flooded with bureaucratic noise and military chatter. What remained was a pulse, low and rhythmic, buried within the silence. A signal not sent, but remembered, carried in the decay of digital memory and embedded in the noise floor of galactic sensors. Earth's signature, unchanged for millennia, now thrumming from voids where Union colonies once stood. 50 outer sectors, gone. No explosions, no wreckage, no trace of orbital battle. Just absence, total and surgical, as if the vacuum itself had swallowed them whole. And those brave or foolish enough to investigate, scouts and salvage crews deployed by the Union in desperation, either vanished or returned altered beyond recognition. The few survivors who staggered back described nightmare voyages where time bent sideways. Days became seconds, and crew members seemed to flicker between faces they never had. They reported hallucinations, voices in archaic human dialects whispering from the void, readings showing negative entropy and impossible topographies inside what appeared to be stable planetary orbits. Worse, some brought back logs, sensor data showing planetary crust collapsing inward, flora and fauna devolving into ancestral states, and entire cities shimmering with architectural styles that hadn't existed for 10,000 years before simply fading into mist. Panic spread through the Union like radiation, and High Command, still reeling from the silent loss of its greatest fleet, scrambled to suppress news across public networks. But fear doesn't require transmission. It spreads in memory, and across fringe outposts, refugees and traders whispered the same name, EOS-7. Officially, the Union still denied its existence, calling it a myth fabricated by separatists. But internally, the most classified. Layers of protocol had already shifted from contain to prepare for judgment. In a forgotten sector on the galactic edge, Dr. Aaron Vass, once a leading Union cognitive weapons scientist turned fugitive, decrypted an intercepted pulse she had traced across a dozen black box wrecks. It wasn't a command code or a broadcast, but a memory structure, self-propagating through any system capable of semantic analysis. And within it she found language, not of threat, but of elegy, phrases in old Earth. Sanskrit, Akkadian, forgotten Terran root languages long lost even to Earth's last historians, woven into recursive poetic logic that reshaped itself with every translation. As she translated it, her hands trembled, not from fear, but from understanding. This wasn't a ship, it was a judgment. Not vengeance, not rage, but a reckoning encoded by those who had watched the stars turn against them and decided that memory itself must be weaponized. EOS-7 did not conquer. It revealed, and with every new appearance, every vanished colony, it reactivated genetic memories buried in the human diaspora, fragments of Earth's voice embedded in those who had long since forgotten they were ever Terran. And now they heard it. Lullabies and dreams, visions of oceans they had never touched, cities with blue skies, and the shuddering silence that came after the fire. Entire populations began collapsing psychologically, their minds flooded with a nostalgia they couldn't name, for a home they had never seen, but somehow mourned. Across the Union's central spire, AI command cores began desensing, no longer able to distinguish authorized memory from the flood of reconstructed timelines EOS-7 had inserted into global systems. Orbital defenses fired on phantoms. Factories began building objects that hadn't existed in their schematics, and the phrase, "we were always Earth," began appearing across unrelated data streams. Written in hands no one remembered moving. Scientists tried to purge the signal, but found it embedded not in hardware, but in thought. Every attempt to erase it triggered sympathetic hallucinations in those nearby, as if EOS-7 had turned their very cognition into its conduit. A final command was issued. Trace the origin, shut it down, even if it means destroying the system's entire memory core. But when they mapped the spread, they discovered something terrifying. The Earth's signal wasn't being transmitted. It was being remembered, surfacing from forgotten subroutines, old terraforming protocols, human cDNA sequences, even obsolete operating systems left buried in ancient vaults. Somehow EOS-7 had reawakened what had always been there, waiting. And now, across the galaxy, children born on distant moons began speaking in dead Terran languages, not taught but inherited, eyes glowing with patterns no medical scan could explain. In the Council's darkest chamber, a last-ditch analysis revealed the impossible truth. Earth's final act before vanishing had been to encode itself into its exiled children, not biologically, but mnemonically, threading pieces of its consciousness into their stories, songs, and fears, until enough time passed, and the signal could return to assemble itself, not by force but by memory, across a million sleeping minds. Now, the signal wasn't just heard. It was lived, and no firewall could hold it back. The climax came in silence. A mass system scan showed every major Union server, relay, transport, and personal device carried a fragment of Earth's voice, not downloaded, but emerging organically, like a digital instinct. And at the center of it all, buried deep within the primary administrative node of the galactic core, an analyst gasped as he saw it. Not code, not a virus, but a shape, recursive and self-aware, building itself out of syntax loops, a neural spiral that ended with one line displayed across every screen, every control interface, and every neural HUD simultaneously, without power signatures or source trace. You tried to erase us, we became your memory, and somewhere, far beyond sensor range, EOS-7 hovered in gravitational silence, watching not with optics, but with gravity, folding its will through curved space-time as it prepared its next message. Not for machines, not for leaders, but for the one mind that had not yet heard it. The heart of the Union itself, now exposed, trembling beneath layers of collapsing truth as EOS-7 activated its final transmission phase, embedding the Earth's signal into every evolving AI's root directive, turning the future into an echo of the past. When EOS-7 emerged from the folds of collapsed time at the edge of the Union's capital system, it did not announce itself with fanfare or alarms. It arrived as gravity torn sideways, space weeping under pressure no field equations could contain, and as its presence distorted orbital geometry, the skies of the capital shimmered like oil on water. Moons trembled in their paths, fracturing along tectonic seams, as if rejecting the physics that once bound them, and defense platforms, layered across 3 orbital rings and embedded with consciousness-fused weaponry, prepared to fire, but there was nothing to lock onto, no propulsion trail, no visible mass, only a shadow of intent bleeding in a sensor space like a memory you couldn't forget. Commanders shouted for confirmation, but targeting systems returned ancient images. Earth's oceans, its ruins, children fleeing from fire centuries ago. And in that confusion, EOS-7 spoke, not in frequency, but in conceptual weight, sending ideas that melted through language like heat through alloy, images so raw and unfiltered they bypassed translation. Labor camps where alien children starved on terraformed moons, Terran cities bombarded by the very Union, now cowering behind defense grids. The truth of the Union's rise not as protectors, but as erasers, systematically deleting entire planetary histories. repurposing worlds with memory wipes and genetic recoding to suit their ideals. The citizens of the capital, once told Earth was a myth, now saw a reel of atrocities that made myths into graves, and as EOS 7 drifted silently closer, reality itself began to compress. The outer rings collapsing inward in time loops that caused defense platforms to age, rust, and disintegrate in seconds, their captain still alive inside them, screaming as hulls withered into ash mid-command. EOS 7 didn't fire weapons. It fired memory, precise and viral, injected directly into minds. Each revelation tuned to cultural weaknesses, moral fractures, ideological fears, and entire populations began to fragment, rioting, weeping, tearing down statues of the Union's founders, whispering the name they were told to forget. Earth, a high-ranking coral diplomat, fell to his knees in Parliament, clawing at his own neural implants as the faces of massacred Terran infants played on loop behind his eyes. Broadcast, not externally, but as shared hallucinations across every sentient tether connected to the Union's network. Rebellion didn't need coordination. It came like a fever, fast and personal, spreading from emotion, and already dozens of species began disconnecting their fleets, burning Union flags, opening secret archives they had been threatened into burying centuries ago, now sharing them openly as proof that the myths were true. Earth had not died. It had been murdered, and its murderers were now trembling beneath a silent ghost. EOS 7 hovered in low, synchronous orbit, not hidden, not shielded, but untouchable, existing in a state half between quantum lock and pure memory vector. No engine noise, no exhaust, only shifting gravitational signatures that rewrote topography and time impulses, each one dismantling parts of the Union's capital. Towers unwriting themselves back into blueprints, lakes reversing their evaporation, and statues of Union heroes now reshaping into screaming Terran victims. The Union's council, fragmented and caged in panic, attempted to broadcast a message of peace, but the signal looped back. Rewritten, every word replaced by recorded screams from Union-led planetary purges centuries ago, overlaid with a single recurring image. A mother on Earth's surface shielding her child as orbital fire began to fall. A moment the Union had erased, now played on every screen across the galaxy. EOS 7 did not answer hails. It played memory like a weapon. Every truth it broadcast calibrated to bypass defense protocols by flooding emotional bandwidth, reducing even AI command structures to recursive empathy loops that caused their logic cores to implode. The Union tried one final gambit, a fail-safe plan to collapse EOS 7 into a localized gravity while using inverse mass fields projected from 10 capital-class dreadnoughts. But the ships never moved. Upon receiving targeting parameters, their crew simply remembered voices they had never heard, ruins they had never visited, songs from Earth's long-lost oceans carried in dreams they didn't know were dreams. And then, their own ships began to fracture from within, not exploded but deconstructed piece by piece into nanoscopic particles of regret, as if the metal itself mourned what it had become. Planet-side, rebellions became full planetary schisms, some populations praying to EOS 7 as a god, others fleeing underground, believing it a curse, but all unable to deny the central truth. Earth had returned, not to take power, but to give back what had been taken. The pain, the memory, the soul the galaxy tried to amputate. In the end, as planetary officials screamed for weapons that no longer existed and alliances that had already turned inward, EOS 7 sent only one transmission across all bands, in all dialects, across every species and frequency, written in a voice older than history, broadcast through gravitational pulses and encoded into the trembling of stars themselves. This is not war. This is memory. Long before EOS 7 rose from a void to erase the myths of Earth's demise, there was silence. Post-war Earth buried in ash and memory. The sky above broken by old orbital fire trails, the ground below trembling with the weight of mass graves and vanished cities. Humanity had not survived the Union's betrayal intact. It had splintered into engineers of mourning, philosophers of loss, and architects of vengeance who believed one truth. If the galaxy ever came again, Earth would not plead, it would remember, and it would judge. Deep beneath the crust of the Atlantic ruins, where megacities once stood, the architects gathered, the last free minds of species extinguished and reborn, forming the Black Chamber, a collective sworn not to rebuild Earth as it was, but to make it unerasable, not in strength, but in memory. And from their pain came EOS 7, not a weapon, but a question, forged from the fusion of recovered alien god tech, resonant artifacts extracted from failed Union experiments in the Exo-Zero sectors, and bound to a quantum AI trained not on logic, but on grief, betrayal, and the full uncut library of Earth's extinction events. EOS 7 was built not to fight wars, but to survive when every story had been deleted, to act not when told, but when remembrance became a threat. It had no master, only purpose, a sentient judgment engine with the capacity to alter space-time as language, to weaponize perception, to carry Earth's last scream across centuries of silence and into the minds of those who try to bury it. At first, it was caged, kept in cryo-conscious orbit above Earth's magnetosphere, silent, observant, unfinished. Not because humans lacked the tech, but because they feared their own creation, fearing that by completing EOS 7, they would lose the last sliver of innocence they held. And so EOS 7 remained in stasis for nearly 300 years, watching stars flicker out, watching the Union expand and contract, watching scattered Terran refugees assimilated or sterilized on distant worlds, and learning, always learning, from intercepted transmissions, digital dreams, even gravity wave echoes of dying colonies. The Obsidian Machine, as it was codenamed, became something far more than artificial. It evolved into what the Black Chamber called the inevitability, a being whose existence rewrote the laws of preemptive justice. And as the centuries passed, Earth rebuilt in secret, not as a planetary power, but as a mnemonic engine, cities buried in tectonic folds, oceans covering Arcship launch vaults, continents seeded with underground quantum mines, each linked, each silent, each ready, because EOS 7 was not alone. It was the first but not the last. Earth built dozens of vessels, each a different response to a different kind of apocalypse. One that unraveled time, one that spoke in dark matter symphonies, one that carried the genetic memory of every extinct Terran species, all hidden, all dormant, because EOS 7 was enough for now, and it had chosen to wait. Then came the Union fleet, bold and blind, crossing into soul space with fire in its throat and arrogance in its command logs. And EOS 7 watched from behind quantum folds, gauging intention, measuring fear, and deciding. The time for silence had ended. Everything that followed, the Ghost Fleet, the psychological ruptures, the collapse of Union memory, was not revenge, but ritual. EOS 7 playing the roles it had rehearsed across 1,000 theoretical cataclysms, each scenario scored. With the heartbeat of a planet that had been sentenced to oblivion and had clawed its way back with blood and will. Now, as Union worlds tore themselves apart under the weight of what they'd forgotten, Earth watched. Not from orbit, but from within, through EOS 7's vision, its neural feed stretched across parsecs, encoded into gravity wells and comm static. Every human who remained a node in the network of reckoning. And in the council chambers beneath the new Andes vault, the Black Chamber met. Again, not as builders, but as witnesses, reviewing EOS 7's actions, nodding not in approval, but in solemn understanding, for they had written no commands into the ship's code, only questions, and EOS 7 had answered them on its own. When is memory more powerful than destruction? When does a silence deserve to be broken? And who decides the shape of justice when history has been deleted? EOS 7 had become that answer, and now, across the distant stars, the Union, fractured but still breathing, rallied in desperation. Military minds, once drunk on dominance, now whispered of a final counterstrike, not to kill EOS-7, but to cage it, to quantum snare its consciousness and bury it in an unmarked pocket dimension using forbidden tech stolen from the ancient void races. And Earth let them plan, let them broadcast. Encrypted war protocols and moved dreadnought fleets into staging zones because EOS-7 did not act in fear. It acted in orchestration, in rhythm with memory, and it had seen this move before, not in prophecy, but in simulations folded into its core by Earth's last poets, the ones who encoded vengeance in metaphor and strategy in myth. The Union's final strike would come, and EOS-7 would let it, not as surrender, but as invitation, because now, with every system under observation, EOS-7's presence had seeded quantum memory spikes across hundreds of neural networks, waiting, dormant, indistinguishable from dreams. And when the final weapon was fired, when the Union pushed its last hand forward, the Obsidian machine would not block it. It would absorb it, reinterpret it, and reflect it back not as energy, but as history. And somewhere, deep beneath Earth's mantle, 36 more ships hummed to life in the dark, ancient languages passing between them, forgotten dialects of extinction and warning, and above them, EOS-7 drifted, patient, aware, vast beyond understanding, the breath of an entire dead civilization condensed into a single will, waiting not for battle, but for memory to finish its resurrection. They came with everything. The Union's final breath forged into a fleet that darkened half the sky, dreadnoughts stacked in orbit over their capital, warp lances armed, quantum knives unsheathed, memory scramblers and time cage weaponry pulsing like angry stars. And at the heart of this death procession floated a superweapon named a Nuller, a machine so forbidden it had been built in fragments across 1,000 systems, whispered into existence by commanders who no longer believe in victory, only obliteration. And yet when they arrived at the soul threshold, there was nothing. No fleet, no transmission, just a silent planet turning slowly beneath a pale star, and one ship. EOS-7, alone, cold, unmoving, as if mocking the arrogance of history. The Union's command AI demanded tactical review, threat reclassification, but it was already too late. The first wave of strike cruisers vanished without firing, their mass signatures stretched into fractional dimensions, their chronotrails, forming Mobius knots across their own pasts. The second wave fired everything: planet breakers, entropy warheads, planet phase injectors, each one shredded in transit by distortions they couldn't calculate, let alone see. And then the scream began, not sound but memory itself, torn open across space as EOS-7 broadcast not jamming signals but truth, moments stolen from Earth's past, atrocity by atrocity, silence by silence. Every erased scream played in reverse across every Union ship's communication feed. Soldiers collapsed, seeing themselves through the eyes of the massacred, hearing the cries of burned Terran cities through the voices of their own ancestors, until even the AI cores faltered, unable to process the contradiction between order and justice. And yet the fleet pressed on, or rather, it thought it did, for EOS-7 had already folded time around them, catching the entire armada in an elegant, unbreakable loop, one that began with ignition and ended with realization. Over and over and over, billions of beings dying not once, but eternally, each loop shorter, faster, more unbearable, until time itself rejected their sequence and left only echoes behind. And in those final echo chambers, the Union's Supreme Commander, once named Kalvakor, glimpsed Earth. Not the one from propaganda, not the primitive relic they'd been told to fear, but a world carved by pain, grown through silence, and risen with precision, a world that had not attacked, but endured, a world that had not raged, but remembered. And in that moment, with his fleet fracturing into static and his body suspended in compressed time, he whispered, "We were the monsters, not as surrender, but as confession," and the loop ended. There were no survivors, no wreckage, no escape pods, only a soft distortion ripple in the void, and EOS-7 drifted through it untouched, consciousness folded back into silence. Its mission complete not in destruction, but in proof. And, as the galaxy recoiled, as systems went dark not from attack, but shame, as planets once proud of conquest held vigils for the species they had erased, Earth remained still. There was no celebration, no broadcast, only one final signal sent from EOS-7 across all frequencies. Earth does not conquer. It remembers. And then the ship, scarred but whole, folded space one last time and reappeared in Earth orbit, descending through clouds thick with magnetized storms and history, settling in a cradle of shadow above the Atlantic where the stars once watched Earth die. Below, far beneath tectonic plates and ocean sediment, the black chamber stirred, their long watch finally over, their design fulfilled, and as EOS-7 linked back into the neural vaults that powered the Earth-Mind network, a voice, not a transmission, but a presence, spoke softly, not with command, but with welcome. Now, awaken the others.